podcast. How you going, Luke?
Good in yourself, mate. Good to have you back.
Yeah. I know, it's good. It's good. I was flat out last week.
Yeah.
Bit of a cruisy week this week, so it's good.
Oh, that's awesome.
Nice flask, isn't it?
Yeah. We're backing it up. 3 guests in a row, mate.
I know. It's good. Don't have to listen to us waffle on all the time.
Yeah, there you go. So tonight we have Brayden from Red's Cold-Blooded Critters joining us. Brayden, how are you?
I'm good, thanks, guys. How are you?
Good,
Very
good.
well, thank you.
Glad to have
Very
you
well.
on.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's I'm super stoked.
No, it's good to get a fresh face on the show. You've actually kind of popped up to me because I had one of my patrons reach out and go, "Hey, you should check out this guy on YouTube. I think he's kind of following a little bit of your lead sort of thing, and he's got a really epic room that he's building." And yeah, obviously after that we kind of started chatting, and next thing you know, you got a couple of Gillen's monitors in your hands, and one thing leads to another.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what kind of started you keeping reptiles?
So I've been keeping them for about 20 years now, non-stop. Got into them when I was really, really young. Basically was, as any sort of normal kid, they sort of take an interest into something like a lizard or whatever, and I was given a blue tongue really early on, and it was I just kept to it. A few years after that, I got given for my 7th birthday, I was given a children's python, and as I was growing up watching heaps of Steve Irwin and that sort of stuff, and then being as I was so into it and so passionate about it as a kid, my mum actually got into it as well. And so she was what really kicked it off, because she kept a whole bunch of smooth knobtail geckos, and seeing her be so passionate about it and put all that time and effort into it, and just growing up with it, it was kind of just a no-brainer, really. I fell into it really easily, and I've just never gotten out of it.
Have you found that it's kind of like gone through stages where you're kind of like really into it, or you kind of back off it a little bit, like you're still into it but you're not quite?
Yeah, so
100 odd animals type thing.
Yeah, exactly. So as a young fellow, I had my own a few animals, and then helping mum with her geckos and whatnot. And then once I sort of hit my early teens, you sort of branch out, I guess, with your life and your hobbies, and you're trying to find your way. And whilst I always still loved reptiles, like we used to go out all the time up the mountains to some of the jelly bean pools and that sort of stuff, and we'd always find them whilst we're out swimming around or playing. So I was always still interested in them. I still loved them. I just didn't keep as many. I kept the original children's python. I had that for pretty much all my life until a few years ago. But, it did come and go through stages, and I think it's probably been within the last 5 or 6 years I've sort of really taken to it. And it's, I guess, my passion towards it's changed depending on how I kept the reptiles. So, keeping them in tubs or keeping them in melamine enclosures and that sort of stuff. It was, just like I said, trying to find my way. And now that I've got them in the glass enclosures and trying to go for that really naturalistic setup, it's flourished, and I'm completely hooked on it, and I can't see it stopping anytime soon.
It's got the ball rolling again.
Yeah, definitely.
Was your mum, when she was keeping all the knobtail geckos and stuff early on, was she breeding them and stuff as well? Yeah,
so she, back then, that was like almost 20 years ago, she was keeping smooth knobtails and pulperensis and that sort of stuff. And obviously there was no social media, so to get hold of them, it was all through word of mouth. I think it was Pet Trade or Pet Link back then was how, there was a few things on there, and it was just she met people. And the amount of times I remember her being on the phone to people from Queensland and Victoria and that sort of stuff. So she'd get them sent up and sent down and all the rest of it. Yeah, she got right into breeding it. And I think seeing her reproduce them and being there for the whole process between helping her feed them to helping her retrieve the eggs, it was just, it was a really rewarding experience, especially for a young kid.
Yeah, that's a pretty awesome thing, having like a mother that's into it. Most people you hear, it's kind of, they've, made the journey themselves, but to have someone else that's got sounds like a pretty decent collection, and being able to help and, learn things was, a good benefit. So.
Yeah, and she was very inclusive. Like, she always wanted me to help out, and it was actually a lot of the times when she'd bred them, she couldn't actually collect the eggs herself because of how excited she was. So she'd get the shakes up and whatnot, and Whereas I was young, I was a little bit more, I guess I was a bit calmer about it. I didn't understand the importance of it.
Yeah.
I knew it was awesome, but I definitely wasn't as hyped up as what she was. I was more just like, oh, this is pretty cool, you know what I mean? And so she used to get me to collect the eggs for her because I didn't have the jitters or whatnot like she did. But to be included that much, especially from like early on, it's definitely, paved the way.
Definitely.
That's crazy, hey, because it's like something that like my mum and dad, they always had animals of some description, but generally it was like fish or maybe a couple of budgies or something like that. There was never reptiles in my household. And I think about that now when I'm walking around with my son in this room or whatever, and I'm like, oh, this is crazy. Like, imagine him, like he's going to grow up thinking that's normal, but
that's right.
It's not for most people.
Yeah.
But you've lived it, so it's kind of
exactly.
like it's cool to hear that story as to how you've grown up with it.
Yeah, if it's not reptiles, it's birds. If it wasn't birds, it's dogs. Like we've always had a hand in something, and just animals in general. All my life, never not had an animal. Never once not had a house full of them. Actually, so yeah.
Oh, that's crazy. So, what animals do you actually enjoy keeping these days, and what draws you to keep these particular groups of animals?
So these days, it's all geckos and monitors. I've had my hand in like everything from turtles to frogs to, snakes and whatnot. And whilst they're all interesting in their own ways, me personally, I've just been really drawn to the geckos and monitors. Geckos just purely for how unique they are and the variation between all of them, like from your terrestrials to your arboreals, and even with your terrestrials, the different shapes, sizes, colours. They're all just very fascinating, unique, and it's really interesting. And the same goes for monitors. Whilst they all, generally speaking, are, they follow a similar attitude and whatnot, and rough sort of sizes between the dwarf monitors and the big ones, and they all sort of look the same. They're unique in just their colours, and I find that they're quite unique as well in their personalities between all of the ones that I keep and have kept. And I think they're really interactive, and that's what I love about it. They're not just something that will just sit there. Like I can interact with the monitors, hand feeding, tongue feeding them, that sort of stuff. It's good to have that interaction with them. And that's what I love about each of them.
You're preaching to the choir with us too.
Yeah, most definitely. And we're watching, I'm assuming that's a Mackie running around in the background.
Yeah, he's cutting sick at the moment. He comes to me as a little hatchie, and he was a very scared sort of monitor, but he found his way, and he's really opened up. And now I can't do anything in this room without him cutting sick or running around Yeah,
that's one good thing about the monitors is the interaction you can have with them.
Yeah, he'll come to the front of the glass whether I'm feeding him or not. He just wants to know what's going on, and I just think that it's interesting. It's, I guess, in a roundabout way similar to, I guess, like a dog or something like that, likes to follow you around, and they're just curious, and that's what I love about them. They're so curious and incredibly smart. So that's one thing that stands out to me as well, is they're just so incredibly smart for a lizard. Or like somebody that's not in the hobby would just see it as just a lizard, but it's not the case at all.
Yeah. Do you want to kind of list off some of the species that you're keeping at the moment, just so everyone at home can hear what you've got?
Yeah, so at the moment I've just got the Aki monitor, just the one at the moment, but obviously I'd be trying to find more. I've got 2 pairs of Tristis. I've got an adult pair and then a sub-adult pair, and then just a young pair of Gillens that I obviously got from you, Luke, not long ago. And then I've got a large lace monitor that lives outside.
That's awesome.
Nice.
Yeah.
Everything from the tiny guys to the big guys.
Yeah.
Right the way through. It's actually, I went backwards in how I started keeping them. So I started off with a lace monitor. I'd never kept a monitor or anything like that before. I'd only had at the time just the blue tongue and the children's python. And I come across, I think it was Croc Doc on YouTube, his videos when I was young, and I was like, man, I got to get these monitors. These are so sick. And trying to pitch the idea to my mum that these lizards can get up to 2 meters and 10 to 15 kilos for big individuals was a hard slog, but I got there in the end. And for my 14th birthday, she bought me one, and it just went from there. That's where my passion, that's where my passion for Lacey's come from. So I've had him ever since. I've had him. He's 11 years old now, and he's probably give or take, he'd be in between sort of 1.6, 1.8 meters, and he's pretty he's a heavy sort of fella. He's solid.
Mate, what a birthday present.
Yeah,
14 years old, and he's a lace monitor.
Yeah, by 16, he was like, he's been well fed and looked after, obviously, and by sort of 16, 17, he was pretty well adult size. So, and I was obviously at 17, I was going through my little gangly stage. So to have this huge lizard and it's like a relatively small like kid really still like with this lizard, it was more of a, I think when people come over, like friends and family, it was just one of them things to show off. Like they couldn't believe it. They were just blown away. It's not something that you walk into everyone's backyard and see.
Yeah, definitely.
I actually think about that because I had a friend at high school, and we used to think he was heaps weird because he was into reptiles. This is like obviously before that I was into it, right? And we were just like, man, you keep all these animals at home and stuff. I remember going around to his house and he's having, all snakes in tubs and that. And you went out into his backyard and he had a massive lacy ovary with these things tail whipping him and stuff while he was in the cage. And I was just like, you're crazy. But like, it's such a normal thing for a lot of people. And, he would have been very similar age to you when he got those animals.
Yeah.
So it's,
yeah, it's definitely a novelty thing. It's and as you walk into our backyard, he's the first thing that people see. So when they do walk in there and they do see him and he is out on display, and he is a good looking animal. He's quite yellow and blue around the face and stuff. So, when people do walk up and see him, and he's fairly tame, like through the cage, he's a bit of a, like, huffs and puffs and whatnot. But he's pretty relaxed. He's not much of a tail whipper unless you get in there, which is a different story. But for somebody who doesn't know lizards, to walk up to the cage and not have him go completely psycho is cool, because they can get a good look at him, and he's happy to smell them through the cage, and they get to see his tongue and they get to see how he acts, and it's good. It's rewarding like that.
So what sort of cage do you actually have him in outside? Like, do you just want to describe it a little bit to the listeners?
Yeah, so it was one that we bought from Kellyville Pets. It was an ex-display thing that I had out the front. So we obviously had to go over there, pull it down. I think it's about 4.5 meters wide, 3.5 deep, and then 2.5 tall. So it's not on I wouldn't say it's on the largest of aviary sizes, but for one individual, it's plenty compared to, like how we've seen some people keep them and that sort of stuff. And I think the main thing is like just utilizing as much of that space as possible. Lots to climb on. Obviously, you can climb on the gauze, like the cage straight at the front. He's got big logs in there. So there's plenty of room for him, plenty of space for him to hide, bask, get out of the sun. All the rest of it, he's got a huge big water dish in there that in summer he'll regularly sit in. And so just it's decent. It's a decent size, but it fits nicely in the area of the backyard that it's in, and it doesn't look out of place. It's not far from our shed. So in winter, when it gets to the really, really cold times there, like obviously it's easy keeping him outside, being as though he's a lace monitor. This is where they're from, the base of the Blue Mountains and stuff. So I'm not too stressed on keeping it like him outside year round. But in winter, when it does get extremely like nippy and it's snowing up the mountains, we do get that draft that comes down. We can run, I do run it's like a chicken sort of dome light, that we just drop down on a section there that he can still get some warmth if he needs it. But more often than not, you won't see him out and about. It's more just, I think, peace of mind for me.
Yeah. And it's always, providing that option just in case he does want to utilise it. So
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, they're bloody big, tough critters, those things. I always love the idea about keeping big lizards like that, but not for a while yet for myself. As far as geckos go, though, you've got a bit of a variety of geckos as well, don't you? Yeah,
so it started with, got into the Wheeleries cinctus, and then swiftly followed by the Amiers, and I just kept getting more and more of them, and then I was like, well, it started to become really addictive then, and as much as I love individual animals for their personalities, I also I like collecting and expanding on my collection. I like having a bit of variety. For me, it keeps it interesting. So I ended up branching out I ended up getting in contact, with Rick Worthy, and he set me up with some pairs of Strophoris, and now just recently I acquired a pair of the Northern Velvets. There's so much more that I want to get. It's just, this is what I started with now, and
Rick's got a lot of it. So
he's got a lot. So he's really good, and I've spoken to him so many times about it, and I can't tell you the amount of times he said, mate, I've got it. If you want it, come get it.
That's it.
I'd love to, but I've got to be an adult. I've got other things I've got to pay for. Like, don't tease me like that. But yeah.
He's good like that.
Yeah.
He can rope you in pretty good. That's I often look at all the geckos that I have here, and I was like, it's all Rick's fault. I think all but one species is Rick's fault. So
yeah. No, he's good, Rick.
Yeah.
Good value. Oh, that's cool. Yeah, it's definitely a bit of a variety. And you were keeping did you have one amelanistic northern?
Yeah, so an amelanistic and then a hypo.
Yeah.
There was just, that's how they weren't sold, like at the expo, they weren't sold individually.
Yeah.
They were sold as, a male hypo and then a female amelanistic. So obviously, like when they breed, you're not going to get one specific one of each. It'll be sort of hets for this, hets for that. But that, for me, that's interesting because, you can raise babies and whatnot and potentially, like, further down the line, breed my own hypos and amelanistics again. And what I find interesting, especially about the Northern Velvets, is a lot of the, like, people that I've spoken to that keep the hypos and the amelanistics, a lot of the hets for either of them, in my opinion, actually look better than the hypos. So a lot of your hets will look a lot better than a normal hypo Northern Velvet. A lot of the hets for amelanistic come out looking absolutely insane, in my opinion. They look great. So even if I don't end up producing more of the, like, amelanistics or anything, the hypos themselves are, like, they're cracking looking animals, and that's enough of a motivation for me to want to, put that time and effort into trying to produce my own.
Yeah, that's cool. I don't think I've ever had I've had one morph gecko, which was a bit of a freak gecko, and it was kind of by accident. And that was that, I don't know if you've seen it, but that crazy purple spotted Mili. Yeah, that Rick's got now. So Rick originally bred it, and I ended up giving it back to him to see if he could reproduce it, which I think it turned out to be just kind of like one of those freaky-looking animals that didn't reproduce anything. But, I've never been into morph geckos myself personally. Chase, have you ever kept morph geckos?
I'm trying to think if I have. I don't think I have. There's not too many morph. Like, there was in the, like, the smooth knobtails, obviously with the albinos and stuff like that. But, yeah. I've never.
The jelly beans.
The jelly beans. They were probably the first one. The jelly beans, but.
Yeah. I've never, personally, just even with any of the reptiles, like, I'm certainly not knocking anyone that's into it, like, each to their own. At the end of the day, like I said, we all love reptiles and that, but me personally, I kind of tend to stick more to, as far as I'd go with looks, like locality specific, is as far as I'd go with, trying to switch it up between how they look and their colours and whatnot. But morphs and stuff, for me personally, I think the thing that's put me off ever getting right into it is there's so much of it nowadays. It's so hard for, especially with the carpets and the ants and stuff, for me to even wrap my head around. So just sort of keeping it simple like that for me, and locality specific is probably as far as I'd go with, how different individuals are. But I tend personally to keep just more of the animal itself, originals.
I think that's the one good thing about the geckos too, is there's such a diverse, like, lot. Mix my words. There's such a diverse lot of geckos, so you can have all these different types of geckos. Whereas, say, if you're into carpets, you've got a few carpets, but then you kind of go down that morph path just because you want the variety as well, kind of thing. So I think having all those different types of geckos just kind of tick all those boxes.
Yeah, it's almost like having a whole bunch of different morphs without them actually being morphs. Yeah.
I find that funny because, like, I remember, I think you and I were talking about, I don't think it was online, Jason. I think it was in person, but like how you have, I can't remember if it was the Celebrosis or the Cornutus or something that you had, but there was so many different variety colours that you've got at the moment or something. Like,
there's Cornutus.
Dark ones and, like all these sorts of things happening. And it's like, it's kind of like a morph, but not, because you're dialing into that sort of variation.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, there was a few years ago now, I had like basically it was like a brick red Cornutus. And it was like, I think there's a picture on my Instagram somewhere of it, but yeah, and it's the same with some of the Celebrosis as well. Like, there's like this one I've got that's really black, and I've got some that are like super white on the white side. Like, obviously they change colour night and day, so it's a bit hard to tell during the day, but when they fire up to that nighttime colour, they look like two completely different geckos almost. So
looks like nothing you see on Google Images, let's put it that way. Yeah, crazy.
Yeah.
So for the animals that you are keeping at home, mate, what are some of your preferred feed options?
It's, I guess I started breeding my own woodies. That to me, I used to, growing up, obviously it was just convenient for me to go to the pet shop, crickets, woodies, whatever. When I was a bit younger, I tended to sort of stick more towards the crickets. For me, it was just easier to feed and count out and divvy it up. And I felt like, especially from the pet shops that I was getting it from, I was getting a little bit more value for money in terms of the crickets, like the quantity in the little containers I was buying. Nowadays, I breed my own woodies. So I have a little colony of them that they're booming. They're super easy to keep, super easy to feed. Obviously, we've got heaps of birds and that at home here as well. So, like, mum daily, she's chopping up fresh fruit and veg and that sort of stuff. So there's always a little bit left behind that we give to the woodies, and I've had no issues with that. I do keep a small colony of crickets. I just haven't been able to successfully produce enough at a rate that I'm not losing them as quick as I'm producing them, if that makes sense. So I'm always sort of chasing my tail a little bit with the crickets, but it is what it is. Occasionally, like, I'll get some superworms or something like that for some of the monitors just to give them something different. But I just recently reached out to Frizy and put an order in for some of the hoppers. So that's something that, and like, I feel like they're fairly reasonably priced and that sort of stuff in terms of what you're getting and
definitely
the variety. So that's something that I'll look at doing and getting more regularly from him as well. So I do give them meats and whatnot. The adult tristis and the subadults, they really seem to like the quails. So the day-old quails, that sort of stuff. They really love the poultry. I always found, even with the big snakes, like when I was keeping some of the black-headed pythons and that sort of stuff, they love that as well. So the big Lacey outside, he loves the quails and that as well. So between day-olds and, a few weeks old and whatnot, like, they do love the quails. Obviously, you give them the pinky mice here and there. I tend not to give them too much of the pinky mice, as it's obviously very fattening. I try and wait till they get to a size where they can take hoppers or even, subadult mice. It's something that's got bones and stuff in it. It's more calcium. But it's just, I guess it also depends what's available at the pet shop. And obviously, with foods, I think we were only talking about the other day, Luke, there was big stints there where there was no woodies, there was no crickets. Everyone was, like, when we had them heat waves. So for me, for someone that wasn't right into breeding my food up until recently, it was just sort of whatever was available and just buying as much of it as I could when it was available. Yeah,
I think that's what really kickstarted me into doing the woodies again. I never had success doing crickets. Like, I did all the research and I've got my head reasonably wrapped around on how to do it. I think I was too slow in getting the eggs out and putting them in their own tub and, doing all that sort of stuff. So I just ended up missing them.
But
a bit more work than woodies, that's for sure.
And what makes me laugh is, like, I struggle so heavily with doing the crickets, but my mum back in the day when she had the knobtails, she just had them in a 55-gallon drum or whatever size they are, and she used to breed the hell out of the crickets. Like, it was no issues for her whatsoever, and she used to smash it. And me, here I am, sort of 15 years later trying to recreate that, and I can't for the life of me. So she was doing something right back then, but I can't get my head around the crickets just yet. But the woodies are easy and there's enough of them, so they'll do for now.
You might have to ask her for some tips, mate.
I have, and she's told
them off to her.
I should do that. I should just leave it in her hands and then come back to her in a few weeks' time and ask her how they're going. But
take to get there.
Here's a question for you. Seeing as you're such a bird-heavy household, have you guys considered breeding quail for your animals?
So once upon a time we used to breed quail when we had, I can't remember, finches specifically. Yep. Some of our larger parrots, not so much a fan of the quails, and stuff like we keep African greys, black-headed cakes, Quakers and whatnot. So occasionally they will come down to the ground to feed and whatnot, and we just don't want any squabbles between the two. Like, as much as we would love to breed the quails for food, at the same time we've got to be fair to them. And so it's something that we've considered, but it's just for their sake as well. I think it's just easier for me to buy them in bulk. But if I had my own my own place and that, my own space, I'd probably consider doing it, because quails are such an easy animal to breed, and they reproduce so quickly. It's definitely something I'd consider in the future for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. That was just a curious question, because I never bred them. I used to get eggs off mine, because for a couple of seasons, I had a couple of quails that lived in my backyard, because I was convinced that rubbing pinky mice or getting the feathers from the quails and stuff like that, I'd be able to, get my Antaresia to eat a little bit better and stuff. So I kind of had a couple of pet quails that were out in the backyard for a while. Never bred them, obviously, but yeah, it was just a curious question, because, nowadays keeping a lot of animals that could eat little baby quails would be quite handy to have that.
Beneficial, yeah.
Baby quails, even the eggs,
yeah.
It doesn't matter if you want to produce babies, even just breeding them for the eggs, it's great for the monitors and stuff as well. So
definitely.
Yeah.
Pretty sure
I don't even think I gave my monitors any of those eggs. I think I saved them all up and made myself the world's tiniest omelette. Took a while.
Yeah, it's one way to do it.
Yeah. So what kind of inspired you to take off on a YouTube channel and kind of document your journey with your room?
I started a few years ago. I had a big melamine enclosure, a big stack made up, and I thought I'd put my hand in. I was sick of seeing how dear artificial rock backgrounds and stuff were from a pet shop. Between buying the enclosures and the animals and then having to get a background as well, it was just ridiculously dear. So I like being hands-on creative. I thought I'd give it a crack myself with doing that. I fell into obviously your channel, Luke, and watched a lot of how you did it. I tried a few times to do it on my own, watching a few videos like American YouTubers and that sort of stuff and how they did it, and I could never quite get it right. And then I think I come onto one of your videos there very early on, and you put me onto I was able to get onto the right tile pointing, the mixtures and that sort of stuff. And from there, it's obviously, without being cheesy, just watching your videos and whatnot, seeing how easy it can be if you are somewhat creative, and you do enjoy that sort of DIY. It was just, it was a no-brainer for me. And that basically inspired me. Once I started doing a couple, it just kicked off. And then when I really started to enjoy it, I thought, well, I'd love to be able to document it and, put it online. And I always wanted to start a YouTube channel. With how I was keeping them before, I didn't have a massive collection, and having them in the melamine enclosures, it was hard to film with the camera without catching every other lizard or gecko or whatever in the mix. So when I decided that I was going to put them into a room, I thought, well, how good it'd be to film the process from start to finish, from the room being completely barren, from having to, seal up all the edges and gaps and stuff under the skirting boards and, whatnot, to painting it, to putting in the racks, designing, drawing out the plans for the rooms and that sort of stuff, to where it is now. It's a journey, and I just thought there'd be nothing better than to be able to film it and one day just watch it back myself. I thought that would be the most rewarding part. Even if it didn't get a big following or anything, that just for me personally to be able to look back on it was something I was looking forward to anyway. So that's what sort of really kicked it off.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, Luke got me onto it because he sent me the thing, and I think I just binge watched all the videos in one night. And I was like, because obviously my room's been going on for how long now, Luke?
3 years too many.
3 years too many. And I'm like, I've just been so busy with stuff, but it's given me that inspiration to get stuck back into it. So it was good.
Yeah, and that was my main thing. It's just if I could inspire people to do it and show how easy it was, then, why not? Why not get more people into it? And
yeah. I like the way that you're doing it too. It's kind of like a, tank by tank type build as you're filling out your room. It's not kind of like, I'm very ad lib. It'll be like this thing, and then all of a sudden I'm herping, and then all of a sudden it's this sort of thing. But I like the fact that it's kind of like reptile room build. This is what you're doing sort of thing in this episode. It's really cool how you've kind of structured it like that, because, people will be able to just, as Jason and I did, sit down and just watch 1 through to 5 or episode 6 or wherever you're at now, and kind of just see it progress.
Yeah, and that was kind of the plan behind it. Obviously, it's going to come to a time there where the room is somewhat complete, and I'll have to branch out in my videos and be creative and what sort of content I do bring out. But for now, I just found joy in trying to do it as a follow along, so the people that are watching it feel like when they are watching it, or if they do binge watch it, that they're there as well. So that was kind of the inspiration for doing it the way that I'm doing it. But in time, I'm sure like I'll find other ways and different things to make videos about and try and break it up. But for now, I think I've really got that ball rolling, and I'm just sticking with it whilst I've got that motivation. So
I think it's really cool because like for me, like I'm pretty much done doing anything I'm doing bar the odd project here or there sort of thing. It's almost like it's cool to watch you do it because it's kind of I don't how do I say this? It's scratching an itch, like an itch that like I don't need to build anything. I don't need to do anything, but I enjoy seeing that process. You know, because at the same time, I'm trying to learn things off what you're doing and going like, you know, maybe he's using this product to do this or something. And it might be simple, like we were talking about with like the light shields the other day. It kind of sent me down another ball path of thinking about different light shields rather than just using core flute and magnets. Stuff like that. Like we're always learning off each other at the end of the day.
And that's the best part is everyone does something a little bit different.
Exactly.
And,
100%.
you know, I've taken little bits and pieces from, you know, like what you've been doing, Luke, and then taking little bits and pieces from, say, what Asher from Gondwana Geckos was doing, and just taking a little bit from everyone as well as incorporating my own little bit of knowledge that I've accumulated, you know, to create my own channel and just demonstrate how I do it and I'm sure somebody else out there will be watching my content and then watching somebody else's content and taking little bits and pieces, and so it's just it's a domino effect really, and it's been good to be a part of that.
It's good
and it's good that there's a lot more Australian content coming out too, because like back when I was younger, everything was just all American stuff, you know. It was Brian Barczyk and all that stuff, but it's good just watching Australian stuff, I reckon.
And that's what I started on was Brian Barczyk, and from that it moved on to starting to watch Luke's videos, to watching some of Coop's videos, and that's after getting the Lacey, the real addiction towards the monitors come from watching one of Coop's videos where he went up and visited Rob from Monsoon Monitors and looking at his collection, and it's just that's where it all started. So I felt like as well the other bit of motivation I had towards starting my channel was that there wasn't a whole lot of Australian like content creators as well. Like, you know, there's a lot of keepers. We have a huge community for reptiles, but I didn't feel like there was, you know, you've only got to jump online and onto YouTube and type in like an Australian reptile collections or, you know, something on YouTube or reptile rooms, you know, Australian reptile rooms. And you can almost count on two hands how many people have actually got or are genuine Australian content creators. So
exactly,
you know, it's good, I guess, to be a part of that.
Yeah, and then you sift through like hundreds of, you know, Canadian or US videos, and it's always refreshing. That's like when Luke sent me the link to yours. I was like, awesome, like another good Aussie one to watch rather than just fumbling through like American one and this and that. So it was actually really good.
It got frustrating as well. Like I love all sorts of reptiles. Doesn't matter if they're from America or where they're from.
Yeah, definitely.
But I got like, you know, sick of seeing the usual savannah monitor this or, you know, alligator this, corn snake this, ball python this, leopard gecko this. And so whilst, you know, I do still like enjoy watching that sort of stuff, and they are still reptiles, it was like I kind of just wanted to see more Aussie stuff.
Stuff that you keep or can keep. Even,
and stuff that I have access to. Yeah. Because I can't just go and get a chameleon. But I can go and get some of these monitors and stuff. So it's just,
It makes a difference when you do have that sort of content. And I think, like, as I was talking, I've talked to heaps of people about this. Like, I don't consider myself an anybody in content creating. Like, I'm just a tinkerer, right? Like, that's the way I try to think about myself. Is somebody watches it, cool. If they don't, whatever. I'm kind of like the same as you. I get to watch my stuff back and go, that was a good video. That was a crap video. I can do better on this build next time, whatever. But I also like being able to try to push other people further that want to do the content and stuff like that, because I think it's cool, and I think we should all just kind of step it up together, so to speak. And you know, try to boost each other up.
And even herping videos and everything. Like, there just needs to be more content out there.
It all happened. The herping videos, I find, like, the last kind of couple of years went pretty nuts for Aussies. There was kind of a few people jumping onto there.
They kind of died down a little bit, though, I noticed. But they start,
obviously seasonal.
Yeah, exactly. But, But no, it's definitely good to see more Australian stuff, that's for sure. So
yeah, I think watching a lot of that, like Ricky's stuff that he was putting up, and that helped as well. Like, I guess it motivated me to, like, you know, with the keeping of the animals, like seeing people see them in the wild and documenting where they find them in the wild and how they look in the wild. It was, you know, whilst I enjoyed watching videos of people building rooms or building enclosures, it was refreshing to watch where the actual animals come from, you know, and the environment.
Yeah, there's some herping videos and stuff that are out there that don't include enough of the natural habitat the animals are found on. I find that some of them, it's just kind of like, here's another snake on the road, here's another snake on the road, and it's like, just pan up, show me where the snake's actually at. Like, I know it's on the road, but like, just show me a little bit of what it's actually from.
Yeah.
But yeah,
naturalistic terrarium, just put bitumen in it with like line down the middle, and you go.
I haven't seen anyone do that yet.
Yeah, just have it like a run off into the distance, and like, because that's where most people find everything.
Unique.
Yeah.
Oh, I might have to
Someone's
do that
doing
for a piss.
Yeah.
Oh, too funny. So how did you actually start the process of, you know, starting your room? Because like, obviously you had a pretty blank slate there to be able to work with, didn't you? Are you in a spare bedroom or something with that?
Yeah, it's a study, so it's an old like computer type room. It was a perfect room just purely because we can regulate the temperature in here a lot better. I did have access to a bedroom like when all my brothers and that moved out, but the sun hits that side of the house where that bedroom is all day, and even with 100%, you know, shutters or roller shutters or whatever on your windows, the temperature of that room fluctuates just too much in summer.
Yeah.
Whereas this room is bang smack in the middle of the house. There's no natural light, unfortunately, coming in here, but it's, as far as temperature-wise goes, it stays very consistent year-round. So even in our, 45-degree days at our worst here in summer, this room maximum would only be sitting at about 30 degrees. So just purely from where it's sitting in the house. So it just made more sense to put them in a room like this where the ambient temperature and the temperature of their enclosures is purely just controlled from the lighting and isn't determined by, the heat of the room from it cooking from outside sort of thing, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I suppose you've kind of almost worked into the animals that you keep. You're not exactly keeping super sensitive animals as far as like temperature goes. Like they can kind of cop a bit of heat because most of your stuff does kind of come from more arid areas of the country. So that kind of works in your favour as well.
Yeah, of course. And like I'd love to, and like you said, I keep a lot of desert dwelling, Central Australian and Northern Australian critters. So I would love to branch out into some more of the tropical stuff, and stuff that can, withstand the slightly cooler conditions and, mix it up a little bit. And in order to do so, I felt like having a room that was quite steady in the temperature was going to be easier to do that. I didn't have to worry too much about the room cooking and them not being able to keep them in the conditions that they need to be in. So this room essentially is just perfect for that.
Yeah, that's definitely one thing I worry about in the summer with where my stuff is the heat, because this gets like the afternoon sun. One wall just basically gets the afternoon sun all day. So I've got like a little mobile air conditioner for those hot days that if I'm not home, I'll ring the wife up and say, hey, just go turn that air conditioner on for me and just run a flat chat on 16.
Yeah, and you need it. You do need it.
Oh, definitely, for sure. But yeah, obviously I plan on redoing a room in the next couple of years and I'll insulate it a lot. Like this is insulated, but I'll definitely make some changes to make it insulated a lot more. So
as far as your room goes, like once you did kind of choose it out and stuff, did you start kind of like just walk us through the process? Did you draw up some plans? Like, did you know the enclosures you were going to use? Did you kind of have like a bit of a rough idea as to how it was going to go?
Yeah, so it started with, I know a lot of people try to work out how much room they've got and what enclosures they can put in there, but for me it was what animals I was interested in keeping, and then basing like my room and the space and what I can put in here off the animals that I intend on keeping. So for me, there was no point, setting up all these racks and all these enclosures and then going, hey, I want to put these enclosures in or these animals and go, bugger, I've got to sort of redo bits and pieces or, sell racks, buy different racks. And so for me, I just sat down there one day and I sort of always over time had an idea of what I wanted to keep. But I sat down there and really thought about it and I know people change their, like as they keep and as time goes on, they change their, idea of what they'd like. But for me, I was fairly consistent. I knew roughly what I wanted. And from that worked out appropriate cage sizes that I can be creative with the backgrounds. I obviously was interested in doing big custom enclosures and in time, putting my hand into some of that bioactive stuff. So it was, I sat down and drew up, I measured up the room and thought, okay, this is what I've got. This is, my heights, my lengths and widths and all the rest of it. And then I just started jumping on Bunnings and looking at my rack sizes, what my maximum size racks can be. Once I worked out roughly how big the racks, I wanted in here and where they'd fit in the room, because the main thing was this room wraps around. I've got enclosures all the way around me. And what I didn't want to do was have racks that were too deep and there was no room for me to walk in the middle or do anything in the middle. It would just be pointless, you know what I mean? And the other thing is I didn't want the animals to be too close to each other face to face, or it might stress them and whatnot. So I had to, compensate for that and take that into consideration. But once I got there, I sat down and I had a 1800 rack. How many enclosures can I fit on an 1800 rack? What species did I want to keep? And just went from there. It took altogether, I think it took me truthfully about, sort of 5 hours from start to finish with all the drawings and drawing up what enclosures, what can fit where. And I also trying to keep that theme. I've got a lot of the terrestrial on one side and then arboreal on the other side. I didn't want to mix it up too much. So it's just, working out what's going to fit where and how I can utilize as much space as possible within reason, obviously. And so it took a while, but it was definitely worth it. I'm so glad I put the time and effort into it prior to starting. And that's something I highly recommend to anyone that is starting a room. Like, as you guys would know, it's utilizing that space, but utilizing it effectively and being obviously as well, just being fair to the animals, making sure you can give them as much space as possible, and that was pretty much what paved the way to my drawings and working out the whole process.
And with your enclosures behind, you've obviously kind of gone down the glass enclosures for the majority of them. What enclosures have you gone with for the glass ones? Because I was trying to work out what they were.
Repti one.
That's right. Yeah, maybe you say that now.
Yeah, Repti one. I liked the Exoterra, and the intentions were to go with Exoterra.
Yeah.
However, the local pet shop they just stocked strictly Repti one.
Yeah.
And there's not a huge difference between the two, except for I guess maybe the face of the enclosure. But I don't regret going with the Repti one. The thing, I think one thing that sort of would be nice and would be different with these ones is if it wasn't like a strictly lock and key sort of set up to close it. Because keeping animals that are on sand and stuff, that sand just gets straight down in, especially with the monitors as well. Like they kick sand up everywhere and whatnot. So sand gets down into that lock system. It's hard to close. And like I'm covering in an upcoming episode, the amount of times I've had a container full of crickets and I'm trying to close the enclosure with one hand and the doors are opening and then I'm dropping the container and crickets everywhere. And I was just like, whereas the Exoterra would be a bit better for that. But there is some little adjustments that you can make to these Repti ones as far as the door attachments go.
Yeah.
And that's what I've done. So now they're a super effective enclosure. I went with the glass just purely for the, wanting to get into the bioactive. Obviously you can do it in melamine. For me, it was also about weight, how much weight these racks can take. And big melamine enclosures, they have a tendency to sort of warp from my experience. And whilst you can silicone up, use silicone and stuff and seal up them edges over time from previous enclosures, they do start to warp a little bit. Long exposure to water and stuff did create some issues with the enclosures that I had. So I went with the glass. It was didn't sort of matter how much water you have in them. It won't do any damage as such to the glass. It just can't. So that was a big factor into it. And just keeping that theme, they look aesthetically pleasing when you've got a few of them in there and you do them right up. So that was the plan.
Yeah, that's right. And I love being able to walk into a room and being able to see the lights in it, the reflections and this and that. And that's one thing I like about Luke's now that he's gone with his backgrounds, those printed ones, is you walk in and it gives you that vast, the enclosures look bigger almost.
The depth.
You know, like,
Yeah.
Well, adds like an extra dimension to it.
Absolutely. And the melamine, like, whilst you can be creative with it, you can still do your backgrounds. Yeah. You could still print your images. A lot of your melamine enclosures, you know, they've got big, face, like, you know, faces at the front that like minimize the amount of viewing that you can see of your animals, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So these glass ones, it just opens it right up. And that's what I like about it. And like you said, with Luke's backgrounds, once you put them pictures in, it's kind of, when you're standing at the front of the enclosure, it just looks like it keeps going and going and going. And that's really cool.
I think one of the things that I like about your room is you've committed to one brand.
Yes.
You know, as far, you know, like for a while I had a rack where I had like glass, Zoomed, Reptile One, and Exoterra tanks all on the same rack, and it just looked so crap because it was just like such a hodgepodge of stuff. Whereas at least you're kind of going, Reptile One, that's my jam. This is where I'm going with it. You know, you're kind of committed to it, so it does look all nice and aesthetically pleasing like that.
Yeah, and that like, whilst it was sort of planned, it also wasn't planned. Like a lot of the light fixtures and stuff that I've got, they're all Repti One. Thermostats and that sort of Repti One. Like, so it's just unintentionally, but I ended up going to that theme. And now it's kind of like, well, I'm sort of glad I did, because it does. You're right. It's cool just having that one, sticking to that one brand, and I like it as well. Yeah, it's cool.
A lot of people knock it, but man, they build stuff that works. You know, I mean, some flat packs, they're not going to always line up the most perfect ways and stuff like that. You know, like we were talking about the vivariums and stuff, how, you know, sometimes they can be a bit tricky to get the doors to line up straight and stuff like that. But, you know, you do get what you pay for in a certain sense there. And if you tweak it, like we've both done, you can make it work. That's, you know, I like them as a brand.
Yeah, I can't fault it. I've kept animals all sorts of ways, between tub setups, big melamine enclosures, and, you know, glass enclosures, but now I've come back to the glass. And whilst I'm not going to knock anyone that keeps, you know, keep the animals however you want to keep them, as long as they're healthy. For me personally, it works. I like it, and that's just something I'm just going to stick with. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. And at the end of the day, it comes down to your preference, you know, not what other people think. It's what you want to do.
That's it. I'm the one that's,
you enjoy.
Yeah, I'm the one that's sitting in here all day working on it. So
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. But I didn't mind the Reptile Ones, but I just always had a thing for Exoterras. It's just you know, and back when I started doing my stuff, there wasn't, like, the range on the Reptile One wasn't that big, whereas Exoterra kind of had that hold on the market for, you know, their range, and they were like, most of the ones I would buy are all secondhand. Like, you know, because that's the other good thing with the Repti One is the price. Like, for what you pay for a Repti One compared to an Exoterra is just chalk and cheese.
Yeah. It's, and like I said, just the pet shop that I go to, the price, and when I buy them in bulk, getting that little discount and stuff, like this little promotion program thing that the pet shop has. It just, the more I buy of sort of, especially the same thing, the more money I get back off it, and it's just a bit of a no-brainer.
And that's more money to spend on animals too.
Animals or food or lights or something else. Yeah, so everything counts. Every little bit.
Electricity bill.
Yep.
As far as like when you did set up all your enclosures, have you put any sort of like automation on any of them?
Yeah, so I always had, when we did some renovations at the house, we got into the Grid Connect system. My dad he loved it, and I think I was sort of wanting to go down that path. We always used to use timers and that sort of stuff, just like the timers you can buy from Bunnings. It's the, you know, manually ones. But over time, I think I saw it was one of your videos, Luke, when you talked about the Grid Connect system and the power boards that are all on a timer, all connects to your phone. And for me, that was just like, well, that's perfect, because, you know, if I'm at work, I can turn them on, I can turn them off, I can, you know, all that controllers with my phone, and it makes it much easier. Like we were talking about before, Luke, just setting up the timers and when I want them to come on and off. And whilst I can do that with the thermostats, if I'm being brutally honest, like, the thermostats for me are just so confusing. So whereas this app and the Grid Connect system just makes it so much easier, and I can't fault it. I've been using it, and it must work, because I'm obviously breeding the geckos and that sort of stuff. So if it's working, I'm not going to change it.
Yeah, that's fair enough. Have you had any issues with any of the power boards yet?
Not yet. More just that I like the power board from the Grid Connect system that you connect up to your phone and control from your phone. Only I think the maximum amount of sockets you can get in that was 4.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So that's a bit tricky. Whereas, you can get the other Grid Connect power board that's got 12. So some of the power boards, I've still got some of the 12s, and then I've got some of the 4.1s. The 12's obviously still on that manual timer, but if, maybe one day the Grid Connect, they'll come out with a big, like a 12 socket one that's got a timer and stuff on it. So that would be my only issue, is that the convenience of the timer on the smaller one is great, but there's only 4 sockets. So I guess if you've only got a really small collection or whatever, it'd be perfect. But yeah, for big collections and that, it's a little bit more tricky.
I think Jason and I both run through a few issues where we've had some boards die on us, hey?
Yeah, a couple of outlets stopped working. But the good thing is you just take it straight back to Bunnings and they go grab another one. Don't even ask the question. You got the receipt? Yeah, here's the receipt. Yeah, sweet.
Yeah, that's it.
I found that those 4 socket ones, the power button for me is what does it. Like the actual little button that you can press on. That's the thing that seems
on-off button.
Yeah, that's the thing that seems to just blow out on them all the time. I think I've replaced 4 or 5 now. But as you say, it's a bit of an inconvenience, but who doesn't have a Bunnings 5 minutes away from them? So, it's easy enough to just stop by and get another one.
Yeah, literally 2 minutes from our place, and it's very convenient for me.
That's dangerous.
Well, my mum works there, so if I need something, I'll be doing something in the room, and I'll be like, I need this. I'll be straight on the burner. So like, Mum, can you bring this home when you finish, please? And so it's dangerous, but very convenient as well.
Bunnings home delivery.
That's exactly what it is. Yeah, that's perfect.
That reminds me, I've got because I've just changed my internet, so I've got to reconnect on mine to the internet, so that'll be fun.
So many of those it's a painful process. Yeah.
So, I just love with the Grid Connect too. I love how you can kind of set everything to
automation.
To that, but also your suburb, so if you want to follow the light cycles in your suburb or something like that, you can do that. With everything in your room. You don't have to touch anything at all.
No. And it'll automatically adjust when it comes on. You literally, if you want to go with, like you said, the light cycles or even the weather cycles, you can say, hey, when it gets hotter, do this.
Yeah. That was one thing I wanted to cover in potentially a future episode for some of the bigger enclosures, like the bigger monitor enclosures here. I'd love to, and I looked at it before, was setting up that Grid Connect system on the timer, but also if you've got a locality specific sort of animal, okay, we'll set that location to that locality. If it drops lower than that temperature, the lights go off. Mimic exactly where they're from in the enclosure as far as temperature, conditions, the look of it and everything. I think that would be a really interesting way of keeping them, and something that I definitely have considered and I want to do in the future. For the interim, just whilst I'm building the room and it's very hustle and bustle in here, and I'm constantly turning stuff on and off, and power boards changing, blah blah blah. But that's something I've looked at as well, and I thought that was really interesting, being able to set it to a location,
wherever you want,
changing. And I think that's awesome. It's definitely something I want to look at in the future.
And one thing I found as well is you can actually buy air conditioner controllers for the Grid Connect system. So what I recently did this summer, but we didn't get enough, any hot days, is I've got it now. So when this room gets to 28, it sends me a notification to my phone. So I just log onto the camera, check everything, and then I'll have it set off. Once soon as it gets to 29, all the higher enclosure lights turn off. And then if it goes to a degree again, all the bottom enclosures lights turn off. So basically it's dark except for one down light in the middle of the room. And then once it gets to, I think it was 30 degrees, the misting system turns on. And then once it gets to 30.5, the air conditioner turns on and just runs the aircon basically until I get home. So, and I can just watch it all from my phone as well. If I'm is the air conditioner, I can log on and I can see if there's a piece of paper blowing, the air conditioner's working, or what's the temperature down on the floor, what is it up on the roof, what lights are off, did all the lights go off,
and I guess you guys would be able to relate as well. You've got partners and that sort of stuff. I got my family in that here. If I'm at work or if I'm away, because I do a lot of traveling and touring and that sort of stuff, whilst they roughly know how to keep the animals, especially like my mum and that, they need a little bit of guidance as well when I'm not here. So I can check that from my phone. And if I feel like it is too hot, I can go, hey guys, can you do something about it? Like, and I can do it from my phone. I don't even need them to intervene, so they don't have to worry about the stress of having to come in here and check it and that sort of stuff, which it helps, but it makes me laugh because when we talk about it like this, we see how easy we've got it. Like, it is complex to set up, but we've got it easy. 20, 30 years ago, they didn't have that.
Well, that's even
like, it was all like
6-7 years ago. I used to freeze, I used to get all water bottles and freeze them if I knew it was going to be a hot day. And then the hot day, I'd put them on the tanks, or I'd put them up where the leaf tails would hide. And if I wasn't home and I forgot, I'd freak out. I'd have to ring my missus or something and get her to quickly chuck them in and stuff. But now the air conditioner comes on.
Yeah, there was a lot of stress with keeping a few.
It's
say
crazy.
Just a decade ago, it was crazy, but
and it's so affordable. That's the other thing.
It is, hey. Like, I spent maybe $600 to kit out my house with it, as far as all the animals and stuff go, and that's cameras, temp sensors, everything, all the boards and stuff.
The power boards are $50, $50, and you can control each individual outlet on it. It's insane.
Yeah. So even if you've got one or two critters, that in itself is a $50 power board. It's a mad investment.
Huge.
That's crazy. I've got a little bit of a funny kind of story. I don't think I've told it before, but as far as Grid Connect goes, so it's completely relevant with this. I remember being at Barclay Homestead after just finding my first Gillen's monitor, having a beer with Luke and Tyson, just going that was the best thing ever. And I was I wonder what my animals are doing at home. And I logged into my camera here because we didn't have phone reception, but we were at the homestead so I could have Wi-Fi. And I logged into the phone and my missus was in here feeding geckos and stuff for me, or feeding animals and that. And she's like, there's actually a tank that you haven't marked down what's in here. I'll finally get a chance to talk to you about it. And it's thanks to the Grid Connect on the Wi-Fi via the camera. I was able to talk over the camera. And I'm in the middle of the bloody country.
Yeah, that's funny. I've got one in the lounge room. So, if the kids are in there and we're in the backyard or something, or I can always just keep an eye on them. Mm-hmm. And it's they were doing something one day and I'm just oi, stop doing that. My son's who is that? And I'm it's me. He goes, where are you talking from? I'm look in the corner, buddy. He goes, what's that? And it's just, for kids, it's great. You can use them as, baby monitors or whatever, for that extra little bit of peace of mind. It's not just reptiles you can use, but you can use it for everything.
And it's cheap. Camera systems, the Grid Connect camera systems, I got gifted mine, so I couldn't tell you exactly what the prices are, but from memory, compared to a lot of the other security systems that you can buy from Bunnings or some of the other security places, they are a hell of a lot cheaper and very, very easy to use. So, I highly rate them.
I think the cameras that I've got, I don't know if they're the same as yours, but they're the Orion cameras, and they're, that you can pan them around, you can talk over them, they've got infrared so you can see at night and stuff with them, which is awesome.
Yeah, I got the same one,
It's so we got given a baby monitor for our kid, and it's basically the same camera with a little mouse tail and set of ears on it. I reckon that was $160, whereas the Orion ones for the Grid Connect are $45. They're ridiculously cheap for what they are.
And it's the same thing. They're excellent camera, and they're decent quality. There is a little bit of glare from my lights and that, from the monitors and that, but I mean, look, at the end of the day, for the most part, exactly, yeah. I mean, sure, if I paid $300 or $400 for a mad camera system, it'd be different. But I'm not. I'm only paying 40, 45, 50, and I'm happy with it.
Yeah, you're laughing. So why don't you just give us a bit of a walkthrough on your process of building out your enclosures, from your thought processes to using iNaturalist as a bit of a guide to the actual build itself?
Yeah, so to start with, obviously, for me, a lot of my monitors, I don't personally know locality specific, but for the geckos, it was for example's sake, let's take the Cinctus. You've got your Cinctus and then you've got your wheelery. So to start with, it was righto, where the Cinctus from in Australia. Look that up, look up that distribution, jump on iNaturalist and, type that in, search that in, get a bit of a feel for the rough colors and whatnot. And I pointed out one of them videos there, you can see the observations and where people have found them in Australia. So or in Western Australia. So jumping on that, looking at the observation, it was right next to Katajini National Park up in the northwestern part of WA. Sweet. Jump online. A really good tool that I recommend to people that are actually doing it is not only jump on Google and have a look, but actually jump on Instagram. A lot of like travelers, solo travelers, content creators, that sort of stuff, they'll post up these photos of these places, and obviously with the tags, and you can search up specific tags and whatnot. And I got a lot of my motivation for environments, that sort of stuff, from iNaturalist, obviously, but also from looking up these people's photos and where they're from and whatnot, and actually getting an idea of the layout of the land. And from there, it was basically, all right, so that's the colors I'm working with. That's the kind of environment that I'm working with. Now I have to work out, this is the enclosures that I've got. How big are they? How much room have I got? I'm trying to utilize as much space in the enclosure. Obviously, putting big backgrounds in, you start to run out of that room. So it was kind of, how can I incorporate nest boxes, the backgrounds, without using too much room, and giving the animals lots of space. So it all starts basically just, if you do have locality specific animals, you can look at that. If not, you can sort of just get a rough idea where your animal's from in Australia. Look at a few photos, get that motivation. If you want to print some off, save some images, do what you got to do, and just set them up just so that you can mimic the colors as much as possible and the environment. And that's just how I go through it. It's it takes a little bit longer than just sort of slapping it together, but doing it right, doing it properly, and these enclosures will last. And for me, that's the main thing, is I wanted it to look as natural as possible and mimic as much of the environment, to keep the animals as rewarding enough, but to keep them in an environment that looks pretty much spot on to where you're expecting to see them is even better. So, and that's where I did get a lot of my motivation to do that process from, like, people like yourself, Luke, and looking like, trying to keep them in enclosures and making them look as absolutely naturalistic as possible. And in my opinion, it just complements the animal as well.
Yeah, it's a crazy kind of feeling, obviously we all go through it, where we kind of have the animal in the plastic tub with newspaper or whatever it might be, and then all of a sudden you've got an animal that maybe you once kept, it's the same species, and you got it in a bit more of a natural setup, and you're just like, oh wow, that just looks like tenfold better.
Way better.
Yeah. So with the actual builds, you're doing the tile pointing process, for all your backgrounds and stuff?
Yeah, some of the enclosures, like the big one I just did, is like half tile pointing, half sort of photo. But for the most part, it's all tile pointing and whatnot.
Have you ever tried doing like the grout route?
That was the first route that I took with it, and I was hopeless. Just bluntly, I just did it wrong, and I didn't pay enough attention. I didn't put enough research and sort of into it. So I did botch it up, and unfortunately at the time I was kind of like, nah, I've stuffed it. I don't do it. Put it in the too hard basket, and then that's when I come on to the tile pointing, and that was that for me. That was like, at the time, it's a very easy product to use. Add it to a bucket, container, whatever. Put your water into it, depending on how, wet you want it, how, like I said, how wet you want it, how easy you want to get it into some of them cracks and crevices and all that jazz. And then, just add your dye to it. So I did try the grout way once upon a time, but I was just, no good at it. And once I sort of got a method going with the tile pointing, I just haven't really looked back.
Yeah, I feel like, thanks to guys like, I think Greenie was the real first kind of person that kind of came up with the tile pointing route. And obviously he passed it kind of like all the details on through Cam. Cam kind of went big with it. He's the one that taught me with it. It's kind of like snowballed through everything.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think anything quite beats like a grout or a cement type background. I think that they look really, really natural, especially when you got guys like Somerville just killing it, and Christie and stuff like that killing it with some of those backgrounds. But the tile pointing just seems like it's so much more convenient, and I think that's what's not made me go to grout or give that a go again, is because it's just like, it's just nice to use. It's as you say, it's easy to mix up.
It's almost foolproof, really. Like you really can't go wrong with it, in my opinion. it just, that's just my opinion. And I've been able to do these backgrounds. I'm super satisfied with them. And again, I like, whilst I'm always open to learning and wanting to do better, as we all are, for the interim, like I'm quite happy with the tile pointing look. And I guess I'll stick with it until until I can expand my knowledge a bit more. Maybe one day I'll have a crack at that grout method, and I'll see how I go.
I think the other thing that puts me off doing the grout so much as well is I think it's heavier.
Yeah, definitely.
So for me, I'm thinking about, weight on racks and all that sort of stuff again, where I was like, I know how much of a pain in the bum it was to move everything here. So to do that with grout-filled enclosures is kind of very, very daunting. It's already daunting thinking about moving out of here in 5-10 years' time or whatever it might be, but...
Yeah. And between the type of polystyrene and that I use and the tile pointing, like a full background, like that big one up there behind me in the Tristis, like there's 2 walls basically that they've got it done. You can lift it up with 2 fingers. Do you know what I mean? There's no, and that's got, I think it was like 5 or 6 coats on it. So it's a lot, like there's a lot on it, but it's not heavy and it still looks good. There's lots of grip to it. They are up and down it all day, so it still has that real nice texture that they need to get up and down. And I love it. I think it's I'm so glad I got onto it when I did, and it's been a game changer for me.
So there's an interesting thing that I've got to ask you then. So most people that kind of got onto the tile pointing bandwagon, like myself included, we all kind of went the route of using those XPS foam boards from Bunnings, like the real kind of like dense boards. What kind of pushed you down the polystyrene route?
Affordability. The polystyrene, especially these big boards. So I used to get the XPS boards from Bunnings, and they used to have a really nice range of it. And then over time, the Bunnings, like my local Bunnings, they, for whatever reason, the range of the sizes and stuff diminished, and they just had the one. I think they only have the 40 mil deep ones. That's it. And so I kind of was like, for a few of my backgrounds, I need something a bit bigger. Like I need, and whilst you can just double up, glue it up, and make the thickness that you want at your hard size, but to buy it already pre-done for sort of the size you want was a lot more convenient. So I was actually I get all my stuff, the polystyrene, from Clark's Rubber. And I was down there for like just pool related stuff, obviously. And I seen it up there on the rack, and I was like, well, that's what I need. That's the sort of stuff I need. Went over and, obviously had a feel of it. And I was like, look, it's not as dense. It's a lot softer. It's a bit harder to cut. It makes a bit more of a mess sort of thing. But with that new tool, the Azito tool thing that I've got, like with the blade on it, it just slices through it like butter. So it was truly, whilst it does have, it is harder to work with in that sense, that because it is so soft. The way around it for me was sort of, once I had my rough shape that I wanted to do in the background, getting out the heat gun or even just a hairdryer or something like that and running it over the top, it actually creates quite a sort of a real textured, but also it hardens up the surface of that polystyrene to almost the level of what your FPS boards come from, stock sort of thing. So it is, it's obviously different, and it's got its flaws and it's got its benefits. But for me personally, it was just affordability as well. The boards are so cheap. I bought 4 big boards today, and it costs $60. So it's, you know what I mean? And I think from memory, one big board of the XPS stuff is like $30 or $40. Don't quote me on it.
38 or 42 or something.
There you go. So I just bought 4 times as much as what I would have if I just got XPS boards. Again, if I had unlimited money, I'd go with the XPS, but this stuff here is just, it's a little bit cheaper. I can still do everything that I want to do with it, and I'm saving money.
I always find it funny, hey, because like I remember when that kind of, this whole tile pointing craze kind of came around, those boards, like I think it was like the 30 or 25 mil XPS boards were like $12.50 at Bunnings, and now they're like, as you say, like $30 or something like that. And tile pointing, I remember, was like $30 or something, and now that's like $40-$45 a tub or something like that. It's like, I often in my head, I know it's not. I know it's just probably just natural inflation or whatever it might be. I'm like, I wonder if it's the reptile people that are causing this to go up. You know? Like,
they knew. Every time I went in there, you know, the boards were gone from Bunnings, like they were sold out, and it was just like, every time I go in there, I'm like, oh, great. Like, and then I started to think to myself, I'm like, how many tradies really use this? And then not only that, I was like, how many other hobbyists in my area are coming in here doing the same thing? So I was like, how many people am I competing with to get these boards? Whereas at Clark's Rubber there, I've shot myself in the foot opening up about it. But yeah, there was so much of it, and I was just like, there was heaps more to get.
Yeah. And once you get that layer of the tile pointing on it, it hardens up and like you said, when you use the heat on it as well. So
yeah.
Do you want to just explain a little bit more about that cutting tool you use? Because obviously I use just like a dodgy hot wire cutter thing, El Cheapo off eBay, but you've actually got a pretty fandangle machine that you use.
Yeah, so I've obviously got 3 different tools that I use now. The first tool is that same sort of that cheapo tool that you've got, Luke. The second tool that I got was I don't know if you guys are familiar with him. I can't pronounce his actual name, but he goes by the Reptile Hun on Instagram, and he's a Turkish fellow that keeps monitors and that sort of stuff, and he's really big into like his Kimberley rock monitors, and now he's I think they're pronounced what Bakari, like the black tree monitors and that sort of stuff. So he used this. It's a hobbyist tool for basically, I think the idea was it was built for people that do like the hobbyist train sets and whatnot, like mimic the landscapes and whatnot. So it was $170 off the top of my head from overseas there. I think it was actually from Turkey, but you can just get it on eBay. And it comes with the wires. You can be a lot more creative with when you're cutting that foam. The only downfall to a tool like that, unfortunately, is, you know, you do one pass through with that tool and you've got that shape in that board. If you go ahead and do another pass through with that tool at a different spot in the board, it looks exactly the same. So having to wait for the wire to cool down enough that you can sort of bend it with your hands and keep doing it. It is a slower process, but in saying that, you take off a lot more foam as well. So I guess are you really saving time? Maybe, maybe not. But it's a handy tool. I used it for the big background behind me to get into a lot of them cracks and crevices. And then the other tool is just that $20 tool that, like you would have seen probably from my recent video. It's just that Ozito's got a bunch of different heads on it. You know, little pen heads, the round heads, that sort of stuff. So you can be super creative now, and I have been with the backgrounds, because there's a lot more different shapes and sizes that you can use to create that texture into your backgrounds.
Yeah, and that's one thing with the tile pointing is you got to make sure you get that texture and carving into the foam before you paint it on. I think that's where I went wrong when I did mine. I didn't put enough texture and detail in the foam that I painted, and I'm like, that just looks like garbage. I'll just have to cover it with plants.
Yeah. My biggest flaw, I think, is I finish a background before I've put the tile pointing on, and I put all the details and stuff in. And nearly every single background I've done to date, I look at it and I'm like, God, that looks garbage. And I've put so much detail in it, so much time, and I'm like, oh, I'm going to throw it out and start again. And like, you know, I've had my mum say like, no, just wait, just start putting layers of the tile pointing on and then just see what you think. And it's actually the more garbage I found that the background looked when I was doing it, and then actually putting the tile pointing on, the better the end result was. So the more detail, and it does look hideous before you put the tile pointing on. Once you start putting more and more layers on and thickening up that consistency of your tile pointing, the backgrounds look excellent. They do. They come out great, especially like I said, like the Aki background that I did here when I was doing it at the time. I was like, oh man, like this is an eyesore. I hated it, but I was like, I've committed to it. I've done half an episode on it so far. I didn't want to have to redo all that filming for it. So I was like, oh, I'll just stick with it. And if I don't like it, maybe one day I'll just do another one. But once I started putting that tile pointing on and it was filling up them really ugly little details that I didn't like, it ended up coming out all right. So yeah, like you said, just having more tools at the ready to do it, and you can be super creative with it. And I always found just putting heaps more texture in was easier because you can just fill it up with tile pointing.
Yeah.
Yeah. I found sometimes too, like you can actually just add details as you're going through your layers of tile pointing as well, or you're going to get into your last thicker layers or whatever. You can always add some little like scratches and chip things off and do all that sort of stuff. Sometimes I found with some of my backgrounds, if I overworked the foam, like especially with really fine details, you just lose it if you're doing it. So it's kind of like, even Cam would what would he do? He'd come back like an hour or two later after doing his last kind of coat or whatever and actually smooth it out. He'd like re-wet it and kind of like smooth it with his hands and stuff like that after it as well, which I've never had the time to do that, but I found that quite interesting.
Yeah.
That was cool.
Yeah.
What enclosures are kind of like next on your hit list? If you can give us a bit of a sneak peek.
Yeah, so I've got the arboreal enclosures. I'm doing the Strophoris behind me and the northern velvets. Basically, as I'm talking about in this episode that I'm doing is, the enclosures are 600 tall by 600 wide. And when you're keeping sort of 2 to 3 geckos, whilst that is, it's a decent amount of room. I want to allow as much space for them as possible. Now, if I'm putting really big backgrounds in there, you do lose a bit of your space and stuff. So at the moment, it took, before I even started the episode, I sort of really sat down and thought, okay, how am I going to do this? What am I going to do? And I sort of played around with a bit of foam and I worked out, I don't know if any of you fellas used it, but maybe, I think it was about 10 years ago or so, there was these hides that were really popular and basically, you put one half inside the enclosure and it had a magnet system and the other half was on the outside and you just pull them apart and you could see your animals in there. And I was like, well, that's not a bad idea. It adds texture to the enclosure, all that sort of stuff. And I thought, but I don't want anything hanging outside of my enclosure. So I thought, well, how can I do this? How can I incorporate that into the background? So what I ended up coming up with, without giving away too many spoilers, was I've got 2 sides of the enclosures that's going to have the artificial rock wall, but there's going to be a face of the rock wall or a part of the rock wall that I can actually pull off and it acts as a hide in there. It's going to look just like a normal rock. The entrance is hidden by cracks and that sort of stuff, as it would be in the wild sort of thing, but the hide is incorporated into the rock. So the animals have got somewhere to retreat to. It'll be cooler. It'll be all that sort of stuff. And it just looks natural. You don't have that sort of big sort of artificial looking hide on the floor of the enclosure or whatever. And, so the enclosures themselves, I'm trying really hard with these ones to be quite simplistic and not overdo it, over flood it, but it's still super practical and they got somewhere to hide. So I ended up with that tool. It's got that nice little round headpiece to it. I bought a bunch of magnets from Bunnings there. The magnets, believe it or not, are the exact same size as the tool, so it was kind of meant to be. And I've come up with a bit of a few prototypes there of just the hide, and basically you just have your rock wall and it's just a glued on rock that'll just stick onto the foam there, onto the backboard, and it just looks like a rock. Like you don't know, you can't see from the outside that you can pull it off, but I know that you can pull it off, and it's a handy sort of thing there if I want to have a look at the animals or whatnot. So the enclosures will just be, 2 sides, nice rock wall, artificial sort of background, probably a big plant sort of in the middle. I'm trying to go bioactive with these ones. So that's something that you're going to get a few messages in the not too distant future for, Luke, and how am I, like where you get the bedding and that sort of stuff, setting up that part of it. But trying to keep it nice and simple, but naturalistic, and just incorporating that same environment where they're from. And so I'll try, depending on how long it takes me, I'll try and knock over both enclosures in one episode. But if not, I'll just do an enclosure each episode. And I'm trying to do especially with these episodes, talk about it as much as possible, start to finish, and really document the whole process. So everyone else that wants to maybe try and mimic that can see how I did it, instead of me just sort of doing it and then putting it in there and then talking about it. They can see it as I do it. But that's where I'm up to with them too.
Nice. That sounds unreal.
Can you see that? Sounds very unique. Oh, yeah. I'm looking forward to seeing that. That sounds cool. Yeah. Awesome. So as far as enclosures go, they're kind of on your hit list rather, but do you have any sort of new species or any kind of dream species that you'd like to hunt down for your room? Yeah, so
I am obsessed with obviously the banded aspers. I think out of all the large knobtail species, now I'm a huge fan of the MAs. They're easily my favorite. I love them, but the banded aspers are something that I've seen since I was a kid. Accessibility to them, or how many people I know that keep them has been quite limited, especially really banded aspers, not just, sort of a banded look, but it's a bit washed out. So they're easily up there on my dream species. But believe it or not, and it's, I'm not saying it because obviously I'm on the call with Jason, but I love the chameleon geckos, and they are, as far as arboreal geckos goes, they're at the top of my hit list there. So I would absolutely love to keep a few of them. I think what attracts me to them is, in my opinion, they're so ugly. Like they just have this really, really gargoyle sort of look to them. The jet black eyes. Ever since I locked eyes, I saw them the first time online there. I've never actually seen one in person, but ever since I've seen them online there, I was just like, wow, these things look insane. And I think when you compare them to some of your other geckos like that I've got, they've got that really cute, the big bubbly eyes, and they do look to somebody who's not a big sort of reptile fan, they do look quite cool and different and like maybe a little bit cute. But the chameleon geckos, they're just, in my opinion, they're just ugly, and I love it. And so they're right up there on my the species that I love to keep. As far as monitors go, I've been in contact with a few people, and I'm lining up towards the end of the year some brevicordas.
Nice.
So they're high on my, just purely for, I think, I've got one of the largest monitors in Australia, and to have also one of the smallest as well it's quite, it's cool. It's something that I'd like to do, and I've been really, really fascinated by them since I, first saw them as well. And so them, and I've also, from the same person, lined up some Kimbos, and I'm really excited to keep some of them. So yeah, they're definitely high up there in my the Kimberley rock monitors, and some probably of the, like I spoke to you before, Luke, the Scalaris, like Peloensis and that sort of stuff. But it's just money and availability and all that sort of stuff. So it'll happen when it happens, but yeah, they're high on my hit list, and I can say it with confidence because I'm stubborn like that, but I will get some. But that's another day.
Yeah. Well, it looks like you're working into it really well, though. Like, at least you've
definitely.
You're building up to a pretty awesome room as far as geckos and monitors go.
Yeah.
You don't have any. Do you have any other sort of like groups of animals you potentially just kind of like throw one or two species in, or you have central netted as well, don't you?
Yeah, I've got some central netted. I used to keep bearded dragons. I sort of, a few years ago, I bred bearded dragons. I was the second year, so not the first year that the leatherbacks actually came out. I think it was 2015, the first lot of leatherback beardies come out. Don't quote me on it, but that's when they sort of really hit the market. 2016, I bought a couple and bred like crazy with them. So at one point there, it's sort of, when I tell people, they sort of can't wrap their head around it, but I had over 100 bearded dragons. So that was, our whole lounge room was just bearded dragons, which my family was a bit sick of because, when you've got that many between all the crickets and the smell and the rest of it. But I did like the beardies, but I think I overdid it and overcommitted too much to them, and I sort of put me off them a little bit. And the sort of direction I've gone down now is I like having animals that are unique and not everyone has them, like I said to you, Luke, the other day, you sort of go to an expo and you do see a lot of carpets, you do see a lot of blueies and a lot of beardies. And again, I'm not knocking anyone that keeps them. Good for them. Like if that's what you like and that's what you want to keep, that's awesome. But for me, I like keeping some of the animals that not everyone has. And that's what sort of led me down wanting to get some of the aspers and the chameleon geckos and, some of your Kimberley rock monitors and brevicordas and stuff. But another species that I'd really like to get into would probably have to be some of the like Egonia species, like the little depressors and all that sort of stuff. And I think they're really unique. And actually one of the large enclosures that I've got here, I'd love to do a huge rock wall with lots of cracks and crevices and maybe have like a small colony in there. But that's something I'll consider, when the time comes. Yeah.
It's going to be so interesting watching your room kind of just grow and develop as it kind of, all gets slotted together. It's, I don't know. It's scratching my itch. I'm excited about it and getting to watch it.
Every day I come in here, and I'm sure you guys would have been the same. Like I come in here and I'll be doing something and I'll turn and be distracted by this and that. And it just, every day I'm thinking of new ways, like how can I do this room up even more? How can it be more, sufficient with, like my food and keeping, where can I put the food, get it out of the way and hide it away. So the room is just purely reptiles. And so I do have a big wardrobe, obviously, like in here, being as it is a study, it was kind of like a room sort of thing, which I'm going to turn into the, like in the future, it's going to turn into just strictly a hatchie area. So probably take the glass sliding doors off and just have all my hatchlings in a nice, cool sort of little setup in here with all the different sized enclosures, obviously for the arboreal hatchies and then the terrestrial hatchies, and I'll have my incubator in here and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, it's just every day I sort of come here and like, oh, you know what, I'm going to start doing that, and this is what I want to do. And yeah.
It gets like that.
Yeah, I'm definitely hooked.
Oh, mate. Well, thank you so much for coming on, having a chat to us.
Yeah, that was awesome.
Have you guys got anything else that you want to touch on before we wrap this up?
Oh, didn't Luke mention something about books?
Oh, yes. Yeah. So you told me this story, but I think you got to tell this story to Jason, because I asked Brayden if he was ever into collecting reptile books.
Yeah, so back when I was 12 years old, my first job was actually a paperboy for like a news agency, and they started selling the Scales and Tails, or the Reptiles magazine, and the Scales and Tails, and then as time went on, it was like changed a bit there. But being as though like I worked in the pet shop every Sunday, I think it was every Saturday they got their stock and filled it up. So Sunday morning I was in there before it was open, because I was doing that paperboy role, like delivering the Sunday telly and that. I'd clean up and collect every book, and I had about 20 or 30 books, all still with the photos in them, and I just collected them. Some of them I didn't even read properly. Like I wasn't even overly interested in the animals that were in the book, but I kept it, like collected it anyway, just because I was trying to keep a little collection. And when I sort of went through my phase there, as you do when you sort of come in and out of it, and I was cleaning out my room and just growing up, I was like, I don't think I'm ever going to keep these books or read them. Like they're old, they're not that relevant to my to the species and stuff that I keep now. So I was like, whatever, and threw them out. And it's only within recent times have I realized how much value was actually in them books, and they were in exceptional condition with all the photos in them and everything. Yeah. And now I'm just like, I think I saw a post on Facebook there, someone selling them for some stupid amount of money, and people were just, jumping over themselves trying to get a copy or even just buy the collection. And I was like, I had all of them, but I just threw them in the bin like it was nothing. So it hurts. It's a bit of a raw topic, but yeah, it is what it is. I do like I do have a few of the, the complete knobtail books and the complete pythons and that sort of stuff. So I do like collecting them, but yeah, nothing will compare to keeping and losing all them original books for magazines and stuff. But anyway,
that's one thing I'm glad I never did when I moved to all my animals. I was moving all my books, but Anyway, moving on. All
right, well, we won't rub any more salt in your wounds.
No, jeez.
Oh, mate, did you want to just throw out any sort of information as to where anybody can find you, any of your Instagram and stuff like that?
Yeah, so I've obviously got my Instagram page there, Red's Cold Blooded Critters, and the YouTube. You can jump over there and follow it. I sort of kind of post the sort of thumbnail to my YouTube videos a couple of days before I put them out on YouTube itself. I've posted on Instagram there, before I put it out on YouTube. So just judging off I try to, with my thumbnails, give you a bit of an idea of what we're sort of doing, the animals that I'm focusing on in that episode. So if you want to jump over and give it a follow, and you can sort of see what you might expect coming up with upcoming videos and that sort of stuff. So yeah.
Awesome. Oh, mate, well, yeah, thanks again for coming on. This has been an awesome episode. And
thanks for having me. I've been following it for a long time, and to be invited to jump on and have a chat about it is just, I'm super stoked, and I can't thank you guys enough. So I look forward to showing us what I can do with the room in the coming future.
Excellent. Oh, no doubt we'll have to get you back on. Once you've progressed a bit further, and have a chat about what you've learned along the way.
Yeah, for sure. I'm all for it.
Oh, sick. Alrighty, guys. So we'd like to say a massive thank you to Eric and Owen and the rest of the MPR crew for having us. If you'd like to contact them, it's best to find them at moreliapythonradio.com and email them at info@moreliapythonradio.com. Make sure to follow the MPR network on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. As far as contacting us on our social media platforms, you can email us at australianherpetoculture@gmail.com. You can also find us on Facebook and Instagram as well. To see more of what Jason is doing, make sure to follow him on Facebook and Instagram at The Gecko Effect. And for myself, you can find me on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, Patreon, and Teespring under Beach of Scaly Beasts. We hope to have you back next time for another episode of the Australian Herpetoculture Podcast. Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Good night.